The Russian Air Force was believed to be concurring Ukrainian skies in a matter of days after the start of the invasion, and rendering the Ukrainian Air Force practically inoperable. Once a true counterpart to NATO, Russia, to this day, operates the second largest air force in the world, having almost 10 times more aircraft than Ukraine. But here we are, more than 300 days into the special military operation, and Ukraine is still flying its aircraft, conducting strikes and shooting down Russian planes. But how is this possible? Wasn't the Russian Air Force supposed to dominate the skies of basically any enemy apart from the US? In this video, let's answer the daunting question of why has the Russian Air Force been inescapable of establishing air superiority? How is it possible that Ukraine is still flying its aircraft, and how is the situation in the air going to evolve in the coming months of the war? In the first days of the invasion, Russia launched a series of missile attacks on Ukrainian airfields and ground-launched air defense system sites. Yet, Ukraine did not hesitate to react. They had to improvise, use highways as runways, and hide their fleet in air bases that are difficult to hit with cruise missiles. Ukrainian fighter jets quickly regained confidence and even engaged in dogfights with the Russians, giving rise to the myth of the Ghost of Kiev, a pilot, or rather a whole squadron, who played a vital role in the Battle of Kiev, which, of course, ended with Ukraine pushing Russia back. How was Ukraine able to pull such an operation off, you may ask? As it is true of the majority of the Russian army, most of the planes Russia uses today are of Soviet origin. Though still reasonably capable, most of them have been based on airframes developed in the 1970s and 1980s. Though NATO also widely uses older aircraft that are refitted with newer components, plenty of new planes have also been designed new. While the US has been developing the F-22 and F-35 stealth fighters, Russia has only been redesigning what it already had. Their newer planes, such as the Sukhoi Su-30, Su-33, Su-34, and Su-35, are still derived from the Soviet Sukhoi Su-27. You can surely see the similarities in their airframes. The same applies to Russia's other jets, such as the MiG-29 and their long-range bombers fleets. And yes, I am purposely not including the infamous Sukhoi Su-57 here, since that's a story for another video. And as the equipment is of Soviet origin, so is naturally its intended use case. With combat experiences in Afghanistan and Syria, Russia has never actually fought against a country with a functioning air force and a vast network of ground-based air defense systems. Lacking surveillance and stealth technology, the Russian Air Force was more often used to strike predetermined targets and quickly retreat from the front line. Unlike the US, Russia lacks the ability to search the battlefield in real time for possible targets such as artillery pieces or tanks. To compound the issue, Russia is also nowhere close to NATO when it comes to detecting targets from safe distances. Their satellite network is also very dated and not dense enough to provide specific information when needed. Ukraine, on the other hand, receives data from NATO surveillance aircraft, such as the Global Hawk, that are non-stop patrolling the skies above NATO borders and the Black Sea. Unlike the situation at the beginnings of the war, the Ukrainian air defense network has been vastly upgraded. After receiving USA Norwegian NASAMS and German IRIS-T systems, the Russian Air Force has limited its actions deeper into Ukraine's territory and stayed behind the front lines. Ukrainian soldiers have also been supplied with so-called man-pads, man-portable air defense systems, such as the American Stingers, Polish Purins, or older Soviet Iglis. Despite their lower range, these man-pads proved to be highly effective against both aircraft, but also loitering munition and cruise missiles. Due to the most missions assigned to the Russian Air Force being ground support, excess man-pads among Ukrainian ground forces makes them extra vulnerable. Russian pilots, therefore, need to decide whether to fly low to avoid radar detection and be exposed to these man-pads, or stay higher in the air and be detected by the radars of longer-range air defense systems. You see, now that Ukraine upped even its long-range striking capabilities, more of the Russian squadrons need to be based at airfields that are located further back from the borders. At the beginning of the conflict, most Ukrainian long-range weapons were inaccurate, and their stocks of missiles like the Toka or older Luna M were limited. But since the US, Great Britain, and recently Turkey has sent their long-range multiple rocket launchers, many Russian air bases were rendered unusable by the Ukrainians. Pushing them back into Russian territory gives Ukrainian intelligence more time to prepare for strikes, because, as we have discussed, they receive from NATO surveillance aircraft capable of detecting planes even at long distances. But Ukraine has one more trick on its sleeve, and I think the Ukrainian engineers deserve admiration for their ingenuity. You know, during the Soviet era, Ukraine was home to many technological sites. Even the only Russian aircraft carrier is actually of Ukrainian origin. This gave it the advantage of inheriting lots of tech after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, including a Soviet drone, the Tu-144. From what is known, this rather antique jet-powered drone was used for photographing enemy territory and other recon missions. Since it's capable of carrying a pretty heavy payload, Ukrainian engineers managed to fit an unknown amount of them with a warhead and more advanced guidance, sending them to their suicide missions. The most common targets of these attacks are bomber air bases, such as Engels, located deep in the Russian territory. These bases are home to Russia's tactical bomber fleet, consisting of planes such as the Tu-160, Tu-95, or MiG-31, which can of course carry long-range missiles. As Russia is really scared of losing these expensive planes, it positions its bases further away from its borders. Okay, so what are the key takeaways from this video? I think that's obvious that when planning the invasion, Kremlin had definitely been rather too confident in its military strength. Given the available evidence, the war should really have only been a short, effective invasion, which Russia had been far from pulling off. And as Kremlin expected much less resistance from Ukraine, the efforts to make their military fully prepared for a full-on war were limited. Again and again, we can see the mighty Russia struggle even though Ukraine did not really receive that many Western weapons in the grand scheme of things. Just to put things into perspective, I'll include a little tangent here. The biggest game changer, one virtually praised by Ukrainians, is the HIMARS rocket system. About 20 of these systems are currently in Ukraine, and already it had made a significant difference. Just imagine the impact of the whole American stockpile, which is around 500 systems. It's the impact of Western deliveries and, of course, Ukraine's great fighting spirit, which made the Russians' Air Force activities limited and their losses significant. And there is also really no sign of change in Russia's favor. As we have discussed, better air defense, more long-range striking capabilities, and Russian equipment being simply worn off after almost a year of fighting make it unlikely for Russia to ever gain air superiority over Ukrainian skies.